The sun dipped low over the Negev desert, casting molten gold across the sand as Commander Rafi Baron stepped into the dimly lit hangar. His boots echoed softly against the concrete floor, the sharp scent of jet fuel mixing with desert heat. Before him, the sleek frame of an F-15X shimmered under maintenance lights, an apex predator wrapped in steel, yet even its presence did little to settle the storm in Rafi's chest. He had flown 100 missions, against Hezbollah, in covert airspace over Damascus, and once, briefly, brushing the edge of Iranian radar. But this was different. A technician handed him a tablet. Encrypted briefing came through, top level. Rafi's fingers tightened around the device as he walked toward the operations room. The corridor walls were papered with photos of pilots, medals, flags, but none of that mattered now. What sat in the file had already shifted the course of their world. Inside, Major Talia Koren stood waiting, her expression unreadable. "Intel confirms," she said before he could speak. "The Houthis aren't working alone. Something's augmenting them." He skimmed the report. Satellite scans of a Yemeni airstrip. Drones moving in patterns too precise for any known algorithm. Infrared distortions in the soil geometry. A heat signature that pulsed like a living thing. "We're not just looking at upgraded drones," she continued. "These weapons have reaction times faster than theoretical limits. No known Earth tech explains it. And then there's this." She tapped the final page. A photograph, grainy, likely zoomed 100-fold, but unmistakable. An angular structure buried into the tarmac like it had fallen from orbit, glowing faintly at the seams. Rafi stared at it. "That's not Houthi construction." "No," Talia said. "It's not human either." Silence hung between them. The air conditioner clicked on. Somewhere outside, a bird cried. He set the tablet down. "Why now?" "We don't know, but Mossad intercepted chatter, call signs, languages we don't even recognize. Whatever they're doing at that base, it's accelerating. If they finish building whatever that thing is—" "They won't," Rafi said, voice low. Hours later, he stood at the edge of the runway, watching as the dusk surrendered to darkness. Pilots and engineers moved with quiet efficiency, their faces stretched tight beneath their helmets. The squadron had been hand-picked, not just for skill, but for silence. Once they lifted off, there'd be no backup, no confirmation, just execution. "Commander," came a voice behind him. Rafi turned. A young lieutenant, pale beneath his visor. There's something else in the log." The man hesitated. "They say the structure talks, not on radio waves, not in sound. It just transmits." Thought Rafi looked at him, then back at the horizon. A breeze stirred the sand. "You ever hear voices in a combat zone, Lieutenant?" The man nodded stiffly. "Then file it under stress, and pray that's all it is." Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Rafi stared at the photograph again. The object was crystalline, half-submerged, its shape too perfect to be natural. It reminded him of an ancient temple buried under centuries of war and dust, waiting for the wrong hands to unearth it. And maybe those hands had already arrived. He thought of his daughter, Miriam, asleep in Tel Aviv, probably tucked into bed with her worn plush bear and half a story still in her ears. She always asked him the same thing when he left. "Do the bad guys ever win?" He always said no. He didn't know if he could still say that. At 0300 hours, the mission briefing was complete. Operation Thunderspear would deploy at 2100 tonight. 6 F-15EXs armed with new payloads developed in tandem with recovered non-human tech. Nothing official. Not even the Americans would admit what was being used. But the engineers didn't speak in theories. They spoke in limits pushed past breaking. "You will not engage unless absolutely necessary," the general instructed. "The primary objective is the target structure. Destroy it completely. Collateral is acceptable. Survivors are not." Rafi's team said nothing. They were ghosts already. As the squadron assembled, he moved from jet to jet, checking each pilot with a word, a look, a silent moment of shared resolve. These weren't men and women chasing medals. They were protectors at the edge of something vast and unknown. As he reached his own aircraft, Talia approached him again, this time holding a small black case. "What's this?" he asked. She opened it. Inside, nestled in foam, was a single gold ring. It pulsed faintly. Found at the edge of the structure. It was reacting. One of the engineers swears it responded to biometric scans, heartbeats, thought patterns. And you want me to wear it? I want someone up there to have it if things go wrong. He slipped it on. It fit perfectly. Feels like nothing, he muttered. That's what worries me, she said, as the engines roared. To life and desert dust curled into the night, Rafi felt something shift, not in the sky or on the radar, but inside him. A tension, a whisper, not fear, but the distant tremor of being watched. The runway blurred beneath him, and the stars loomed ahead. They had been warned in their own way. But now the warning was over. Now came fire. The sky above the Gulf of Aden was ink-black and motionless, broken only by the silent scream of 6 F-15Xs cutting through the night. Inside his cockpit, Rafi's breath echoed in his helmet, steady but tight. The HUD danced with green symbols, mapping the approach corridor. Tight, narrow, hugging terrain like a stalking predator. Beneath them, stretched kilometers of jagged desert and salt-flat emptiness. And beyond that, buried within the Yemeni highlands, their target pulsed like a buried nerve. "Raven 1, all systems green," came a voice in his ear. Captain Eliav, his wingman. "Maintain silence," Rafi replied. "Let the machines do the talking." Stealth drones had gone ahead minutes earlier, scrambling radar, mimicking flocks of birds, false signals, digital ghosts. It wouldn't last. The base was awake. The alien structure had its own sense of things, and the humans guarding it had become something else. The first sign came at 23:41 hours. Rafi's instruments flickered, briefly distorting. Not a malfunction. Something more refined. Interference without source or pattern. Like a hand pressed gently against the cockpit glass, unseen, testing. "Phantom flux detected," Talia's voice chimed in from command. "All units stay tight. Prepare for autonomous counter-defense." He knew what that meant. The alien system wasn't waiting to be struck. It was learning them right now, identifying velocity curves, radiation signatures, even neural rhythms. This was no crude weapon. It was a mind. Ahead, the airbase emerged, not in lights but in silence, rows of hangars shaped like inverted pyramids, glowing faintly with violet energy. The structure at the center, the objective, stood taller than expected. It wasn't buried anymore. It had risen. Its form was no longer entirely geometric. It shifted as they drew near, fractal edges bending in ways human eyes weren't meant to understand. And in its heart pulsed the same golden light as the ring on Rafi's finger. He didn't understand why it responded to him. He only knew that it did. "Raven flight, engage," he said. Missiles detached like falling stars, streaking toward their targets. In response, arcs of energy surged upward from the base, curved, bright, and impossibly fast. One missile disintegrated mid-air, unraveling molecule by molecule. Another twisted in on itself and dropped. Rafi fired again, this time the experimental payload. It was crude by alien standards, but violent in design. A quantum disruptor warhead, unstable and hungry. When it hit, the air peeled back. Sound disappeared. For 2 seconds, the structure glowed brighter than dawn, then imploded inward with a silent scream. The shield surrounding the base cracked like glass under strain. "Target struck. Secondary detonation in 30, Eliav confirmed. But Rafi wasn't listening. His vision blurred. Not from impact or G-force, but from something deeper. A whisper through the HUD, subtle and quiet. Symbols moved across the screen. Not language, not code, meaning. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in thought. You fear what you do not understand. You destroy what you cannot control. The cockpit's electronics shimmered. Warnings blinked across every panel. One of the jets spiraled, its pilot screaming something garbled before static cut the feed. "System override!" another pilot shouted. "I'm locked out!" Rafi's training kicked in. He reached down, flipped the manual control circuit, and throttled into analog mode, pure flight, no automation. He surged upward, breaking free from the zone of interference, heart slamming. Below him, the structure pulsed again, despite the damage. Its skin was cracked. Alien scaffolding now glowed with internal light, recovering, repairing. It wasn't dead. Not yet. He leveled out and saw the others forming up again, battered but intact. "We go back for another run," he said. "There's movement underground," Eliav warned. "Sensors showing a heat bloom beneath the target." The earth below cracked, and from within rose something tall, thin, cloaked in plates of metallic bone. It stood in the ruins of the base, humanoid in shape but clearly not human. Its face was smooth, expressionless, crowned with flickering data streams that extended like horns. "I am the architect," the thought came, intrusive and precise. "This world is not ready." Rafi stared as the being turned its gaze to him, not the plane, not the machine, but him. A sensation surged through his skull like static wrapped in sorrow. He saw flashes, images of other worlds, other strikes, other species reduced to ash under the weight of human fear. The architect raised a hand. The base around it surged, light folding. Toward the figure like it commanded the very rules of space. Rafi knew then what this was. Not an outpost, a seed, a test. "We end it now," he said, more to himself than anyone. He armed the last kinetic bomb, a relic by today's standards, but pure, brute, unhackable. He locked onto the epicenter and dove. Alarms screamed, turbulence battered him. The architect raised both arms now, as if bracing or beckoning. Rafi's HUD flickered, the ring on his hand burning cold against his skin. "You have chosen violence. The stars will remember." He released the bomb. Impact. The shockwave punched through the valley like thunder from the gods. A column of fire reached into the sky, silent at first, then roaring with concussive power. Dust, steel, alien alloy, everything lifted and vanished in a plume of destruction that eclipsed the night. Rafi pulled away, jet rattling under strain, muscles straining against gravity. When he looked back, the base was gone. The structure was gone. The architect was gone. But the whisper remained. In the silence that followed, his ring pulsed once, and then stilled. "Target neutralized," he said, his voice calm. But inside, something had changed. Not victory, not relief, just silence. And the feeling that something far beyond Earth was now watching. The crater where the Houthi airbase once stood smoldered for hours, its scorched edges etched like a wound in the earth. No structure remained, no trace of alien geometry, no figure cloaked in starlight, only ash and silence. Yet back at the command center in the Negev, the silence didn't bring peace, it brought questions. Commander Rafi Baron sat alone in the debriefing room, the overhead lights humming faintly. A panel of intelligence officers loomed behind mirrored glass, unseen but palpably present. His flight suit bore the marks of heat and time, and the ring still circled his finger, dull and lifeless now. "You're certain it was destroyed?" A voice finally crackled through the intercom. Rafi didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the digital display showing a thermal satellite replay of the final detonation. Even in stillness, something felt unfinished. The structure is gone, but I don't believe that's the end of it." The voice was quiet for a moment. "You engaged an intelligent entity. You claim it communicated with you." "I don't claim," he said. "It did. Not in words, in patterns, thought, intention. It wasn't defensive. It was observational, curious." There was a pause, and then a second voice, colder. "Why didn't it strike first?" "Because we did," Raffi said simply. They let that hang. The silence was more verdict than acknowledgement. That night, Raffi returned to his quarters, where the ring sat now on the table beneath a small lamp. He'd tried to take it off, but it wouldn't move. Not forcibly, not surgically. Medical scans showed nothing unusual, no subdermal fusion, no magnetic interference. It was as if his body had simply accepted it as part of him. Or worse, the ring had decided he belonged to it. He rubbed his temples. The architect's words, or impressions, still haunted him. This world is not ready. Ready for what? Integration? Contact? Or perhaps erasure? A soft knock on the door pulled him back. It was Major Talia Corin, her uniform crisp despite the chaos of the last 48 hours. She stepped inside and handed him a tablet. "UN just declared the strike a classified anomaly," she said. "Satellite data wiped. No international acknowledgement. They're folding this into the existing counter-terror narrative." "And the architect?" Talia hesitated. "Doesn't exist. Officially." Raffi stared at the tablet, where the last confirmed images of the structure had been scrubbed, leaving only scorched ground. The war, for all the noise it made, was being erased like chalk from a board. "They're not just erasing the evidence," he murmured. "They're erasing the question." "The world's not ready for that question," she replied, her voice tight with something like regret. He looked at her then, not as an officer, but as someone who had shared the weight of what they had seen. "You felt it too, in the air, in your bones. That wasn't a machine we destroyed. It was a message." She didn't argue. Outside, the sky had begun to change, not in color or pattern, but in its watching stillness. The satellites had picked up an object in low Earth orbit the day after the strike. It hadn't appeared by propulsion or launch trajectory. It had simply been there, cylindrical, cold, humming with soft pulses beyond the spectrum of light. It made no contact, made no move, it just observed. And then just as silently it vanished. Some claimed it was a weather balloon, others a glitch. But Raffi knew the truth. They had sent a probe. Not a weapon. A witness. In the days that followed, the ring began to shift, not physically, but in how it responded. When he touched it, he saw symbols, brief flashes of language not his own, as if something on the other side was still speaking faintly across a broken channel. He stopped reporting the phenomenon. He knew what the brass would do. They'd try to cut it off him, cage him, dissect the signal like it was just another frequency. But this wasn't noise. It was intelligence. And it had chosen him. One morning, Miriam called. Her voice was soft with sleep and worry. "Abba," she said, "I had a dream. Your plane flew into a star." He didn't know what to say, so he smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Was it a good dream?" "Yes, because when it came back, you were glowing." He ended the call with a knot in his throat. 2 nights later, the ring pulsed again. A single beat. No heat, no pain, just presence. And then, on the far side of the sky, an aurora shimmered unnaturally in a region where no solar activity had been recorded. The scientists were baffled. The military scrambled. But Raffi just watched. The architect was gone. But the stars were not empty. He stood alone in the hangar, staring up at the stars beyond the open doors. His F-15 sat in shadow, quiet, unchanged. Yet he knew the next flight he took would not be like the last. Somewhere, beyond Earth's reach, they were waiting, not for war, for an answer. and humanity had already spoken.